welcome back. We're going to do two Michael Crichton directed films from the 1980s. Like, he made three, but there was another one with Burt Reynolds, which was just a detective cop thing. I never watched that one. But these are the two sci-fi movies he made, following on from his big success with Westworld and The Great Train Robbery. Neither of which did that well, and they are kind of flawed films. So this is going to be pretty much a quickie. It's not going to be like the most in-depth like video ever. But these are interesting films. They are now getting releases in Blu-ray like years later. I think people are now starting to see there was some value to them, even though at the time they came across as schlocky. I remember I saw both of these when in the 80s, the TV, and I did think they were kind of schlocky and kind of silly and very TV movies. And that's what they still have in them. They're not shot like Crichton was not a great visualist. He's not like Spielberg or De Palma, who could take these kind of stalking scenes and make them really fascinating, or do a suspense scene and really deliver. He was okay at it, but it was like a TV movie director okay. You're not getting like the really clever visual style of a proper director. You get an author who's directing his own scripts, so the scripts can actually see what he wants to say with them. But you're not going to get like a visual like masterpiece. And Looker's probably the better film of the two, even though it's the messier one, but it is the more ambitious one. Because Looker was actually with plastic surgery well before its time, before blood surgery became a big thing. Starred Albert Finney, and one of his This and Wolf were two big films he made in America, but usually avoided America. But this was his brief flirtation with it. This didn't really go that well, so he came back to Britain. But this one is... But both of them are interesting films. Both of them are kind of flawed, though. But this one is a more ambitious film, but I think Wolfen's a more enjoyable film. So Looker the idea is like a plastic surgeon finds that some of his models are dying. Some of the models he did some work for are dying. Like, these models have very specific things they wanted done, which didn't make any sense to him, but it was like, well, they're paying me, and it's like, why not just do what they want? I mean, it's like... So he's doing that, and he's friendly with the models. He likes them, but he wonders why they're doing this. And then they end up dead. And he's like, well, what the hell's going on? And he discovers a conspiracy within the modelling world. And this plastic surgery is actually happening due to computer specifics. It's idea about computerization of advertising, computerization of imagery, and what you see, and how computer can actually manipulate imagery to give you what you want to see. So this is about what's happening now in the world. It's like the idea of looking at what your eye looks at when you're looking at an ad, so you're not actually having your attention drawn to anything that's not what they want you to see. And it's like, where's the weaknesses in different imagery that would create a problem for you getting a point across. So this film needed Brian De Palma. Really, it needed Brian De Palma to direct it. It needed De Palma for him to take his style and actually do something interesting with it. That's what it needed. Instead, Crichton, who wasn't as good as this kind of stuff. But I mean, there are pleasures though. I mean, he does like writing women characters, so he doesn't write women who are just like nobodies. He does in this film. The women have quite good characters, and he tended to do that with Coma as well and Great Train Robbery. So in this period, he was writing good women characters, and Susan Day plays the female lead. It's a lot of fun in this one. And you've got a lot of interesting things going on, but it does feel a bit TV movie-ish. It does drag. But it's fascinating. It's one of those films that should get a remake, really. Because the ideas are so good. The idea is that it's about what you're seeing, how it manipulates you, how you can use computer imagery to actually adjust things so that the imagery is always there to get you hooked in. So how they use this on like presidential campaigns, how they use it on modelling campaigns, so you're always been focused on what they want you to see. Then how does it affect like just life, like news and things like that, and how having a better sophistication of visual imagery can be used and abused by the power elites to actually just brainwash it into subliminal imagery without you realising what they're doing, because they're so clued into how your eye takes in images and ideas, so you can get manipulated without you realising you're manipulated. And so that basically you're a slave to the images. And this Susan Day character goes home and sees her parents, and they're always watching TV because they're addicted to it. So it's the idea of the process already started with TV, and this is just the end point. This is the end point of how do you affect your eye. And there's scenes where the models try to do a pose for them, they want a certain thing because the computer says this is the best pose. It turns out the models are getting killed because that plan wasn't a very good idea ultimately, so they get rid of the evidence. And they've got all these other things, and James Coburn's a guy behind it, and he's talking about how this is a new power, basically. So Crichton was really good at this idea of what are the powerful people really doing. And Coburn's this character who seems like a guy who's nice, he gives to charities, he seems concerned for the world, but it turns out behind the scenes he's much more sinister. You know, what you hear about Bill Gates and, a Jeff Bezos type of character, that's the thing. It's just that type that's always been around, this idea of you shouldn't trust the guys with all the money. It goes to their heads and they start to think they can play God and manipulate you into all sorts of ways. And you've got these things, idea about these guns who mess around with your view, so you think you're seeing something but you can't see the person who's messing with you because they've done something to your ability to view things. So these guns happen, you get a car chase with them. Again, it's what you wish a really good director doing it, because it's fine the way they do it, but it could have been way more exciting, way more interesting. And it's also a really good idea of images shot into your eye that causes a blind spot, and you lose time or you lose the ability to see someone who's right in front of you. And that's a really fascinating idea. And Crichton's always had lots of good ideas like that. Again, this film, it's there, but it's not really delivered in a way that you really want it. But it's still an enjoyable film. It's still a great idea film that doesn't really back it up with the visuals. And they're good actors, but who are doing their best, but they're not getting directed to someone who can really bring the best out of them. Like doing a professional job, basically. And that's the kind of frustration of both these films is. It's like, they're fine, but Crichton kind of gets some good actors, but other ones, it's a bit dodgy of why do you choose them. It's that thing in the film, in both films, where he just seems to... He's a weird taste in films. Even when he back to being a writer, when he was producing some films, he would have weird ideas about them as well. I mean, like 13th Warrior was notoriously redone, and then they cut in room by Crichton because he wanted it a certain way, and it was like, well, you're a good director, why are you messing about with it? And I heard Sphere had the same problem, and both those films were very compromised. And it's like, you didn't have a director like Spielberg saying, no, we're doing this. So he needed a strong hand on him, I think. I think he had a lot of good ideas, but he could sometimes really miss. Now, Runaway is this follow-up. This was a outright bomb, I think. I remember it getting released, did not do well at all. And this one is more TV movie-ish even than Looker, because it stars Tom Selleck, who was a TV star, who always tried to push into movies, and he never really worked as a movie star. Because he acted for TV, his style was TV acting. And then the camera can tell. There's a certain kind of acting that's very much for movies, and there's a certain acting that's very much for TV. And he had that TV acting style down, and he always came across as a TV actor, and so he never really managed to jump over. So they tried this and High Road to China and things, and then it was like, okay, give up. He did a hit with Three Men and a Baby, but that was with other actors, so he wasn't the lead. And this one, he's fine, but it's like one of those things, any actor could have done this part well and been competent in it, and a movie star would have made this a lot better. It's just one of those things, it's like, he's okay in this film. His leading lady's much more fun, but she's still just okay. She does a feeling of a TV actor as well, but just doing better. And then Gene Simmons is the villain. It's just this cast does not seem like they could. It always feels like they got the people who were way down the list. Like everyone read it and said, "I'm not doing that," and then they got who they got, and they did their best with it. But the ideas are actually quite good. Basically, Selleck plays this guy who goes and deals with robots who are in the houses nowadays and who are breaking down. And he goes, if there's any problem, he goes and sorts them. That's usually it. You just need to sort it, like change some part or something. He had a past in the cops, so because he's a computer expert, he had a difficult past. He went and started working with robots. He enjoys it. And it's just this thing where you don't need that many people doing this. You think having a couple of people do it and that's it. It's just a little division. They go and sort stuff before it gets out of hand. And then it becomes a case of these things are getting adjusted maliciously by the big villain. And he has to hunt them down, and a conspiracy ensues. Again, it sounds like a TV show. It sounds like something that could have been like a long-term TV show. It doesn't feel like a film. And it just feels like the end of the fifth film, they've had one adventure among many. It does not feel like, it doesn't look like a film. It doesn't have that much action. There's a scene earlier on where a robot goes mad and kills people in the house. And it's not that violent. And it just doesn't feel violent. And it just feels like a procedural TV show. Which is a real shame because the ideas are great. The idea basically is that the robots are starting to advance and you can start manipulating them subtly to be violent. And it's about like what happens to robots domestically once they come into a household. How can they be manipulated by corporations, by individuals trying to blackmail corporations, by a black market around robotics. All this stuff's interesting. And the film's enjoyable because the ideas are interesting. But the film doesn't do itself any favours in how it sells them. Because it does come across as very TV. It just feels like a TV movie. But the ideas are still good. It's one of those things that you should remake this one. This is the one they showed they could remake, a film we could remake as a TV show and do some really cool stuff with. Because the ideas are good. There's a bullet, a guy making shoot a bullet around a corner, which is really cool. There's lots of stuff like that are really interesting. And just the idea of how things are manipulated behind the scenes and how corporations are behind a lot of stuff in ways you wouldn't want them to be, and how the police can be manipulated by corporations, they can be manipulated by criminals in different ways that you wouldn't expect, but because the robotics have now changed the game, it's now a threat to them. Full of stuff like that is wonderful, and it's like, you could do so much with this. And nowadays especially, we're getting more robotics in the houses. This could be a great TV show. You could do some really subtle stuff and do some really creepy stuff with this idea now. Like cops who have to go and solve these robots before they become violent in case there's any problem. But, you know, that could be really good because it's called Runaway because these are runaway machines, or machines that have failed, but they just need sort of fixing. But the idea of this manipulation, how does it tie to the law? How does it tie to corporations? All of this stuff is really fascinating, and the way they do it is almost like it's just a job. I go and do this every day. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's boring, but it's just a job. It's really fun. It's really enjoyable. This idea that this thing's out of hand, in a way that they don't expect. Because everyone's just doing a job. It's like it's not meant to be that interesting as a job, and how it just slowly gets out of control. And how it slowly builds up. All that stuff's really cool. It just needed a different director and a different cast. And it could have been something. Again, this thing with Crichton was like he was doing this stuff and he just needed to take himself out of the mix as a director and just give himself some like good actors and give the actors a director who had some real drive to them. And it really would have worked a lot better in both these cases. It just was the wrong director. But the ideas are really good. The ideas are really solid, and you could think these both could have been really interesting films. But instead, they just, because the way they were shot, it just became, of course, as TV movies, and they were paced wrong. And even Crichton says later on, like if we look back on them, we would paced them up quite a bit because they do have that kind of draggy feel to them. Like they should have been, both should have been like 10 minutes shorter at least. And the ideas just needed more punch to them, and the revelations needed more punch to them, and they didn't really get that because the way they were shot. Like, the director was more interested in ideas than the actors. He was more interested in ideas than the visuals. And no matter what he did, the ideas were the thing, and the stuff of filmmaking wasn't the thing, and that should have been really important and wasn't there. And that's the big problem with authors who direct scripts, or who are just the writer directing. I mean, some writers know this. Like someone like Shane Black knows that he has to direct it in a visual way. Even though he's not going to be the most visual director, he knows he has to make it interesting and exciting. This is a case of shot like a TV movie, and with a big budget. And I'm sure when the film came in, and the executive saw it, it was like, why does this look like a TV movie? I'm sure one of the reasons why they failed, I'm sure they pretty much weren't advertised that heavily because they look like TV movies. But they are interesting. They are worth seeing. Especially now, you can see them pretty cheap. One's in premium, but Looker's in premium from HMV, and Runaways from 101 Films. I think you can get both of them fairly cheap. So I would definitely recommend getting them cheap because the ideas are really good, but the presentation's not. So I hope you enjoy this. I'll be back soon for another one. Right, bye for now.